David Jenkins has had a rough few hours. He received an anonymous letter stating that his wife, Lauren, with whom he has been married for 6 years, was seen entering a cheap motel room the previous Wednesday afternoon. The letter also stated that she was having dinner with the same man again. David was shocked and disbelieving. Lauren and David were madly in love, having sex 3 to 5 times a week. Their intimate moments were passionate and genuine. David was under 30 and found their lovemaking intense and enjoyable. However, he couldn't brush off the email's implications. Stressed and on edge, he drove home that day, already a changed man, arriving home around 6. "I'll be home around 6 p.m. morning." As usual, he saw Lauren's car already in the driveway, still in her work clothes. She was standing at the sink rinsing vegetables when he walked into the kitchen. He said hello hesitantly and set down his briefcase. "Hey, sweetie, how was your day?" Lauren wiped her hands with a towel. Before turning to kiss him, David was amazed at how curate Lauren was after spending the day with another man. "It was great, but there was some bad news this afternoon related to a project we're working on. It looks like I have to go to Greensboro on Friday, so I won't be home until 8, 10 p.m., 5 p.m., at the earliest, depending on how the meetings go. Then just drive home." David knew Lauren's work schedule pretty well. He knew it was most flexible on Wednesdays and Friday afternoons. So his first thought on checking the charges in this email was to make it even easier for Lauren on the upcoming Friday. The project crisis, the meeting, and the business trip were all lies. Instead, he'd arranged to take Friday off to do some preliminary work and look after the motel for Lauren. Her lover, well, at least you don't have to stay overnight, and we'll still spend the whole weekend together. Lauren suggested that since you can't really predict when you'll be home, could you give me a call when you leave Greensboro? I'll try my best to get ready for dinner. David thought for a moment yesterday that he wouldn't have noticed or even considered how considerate Lauren had been in trying to make dinner together possible, despite his unplanned business trip. Now he wondered if she'd asked him to give her a 2. "I'll give you a call when I know when I'll be leaving Greensboro. I'll also call you from the road when I know what time I'll be home. Is that okay?" Friday was meant to make it easier for Lauren to cheat again, if it was her at the motel. If that email was accurate, David wanted Lauren to feel comfortable knowing that he wouldn't have a chance to catch her. "David, I'm going to make dinner, and then I'm going to take a quick shower. Could you keep an eye on that skillet while I'm gone? Make sure the vegetables don't burn." "Don't worry," David replied, thinking to himself that it was strange that she usually left her purse downstairs. The shower also got him thinking, as it was not uncommon for her not to shower immediately. Upon returning home, he looked through his mail and stirred the vegetables, nervously wondering whether the random shower was related to the news in the email he'd received earlier. "To hell with my life," David thought. "One anonymous email and I'm questioning everything about my marriage that until today I thought was absolutely wonderful." At dinner, David was visibly thoughtful. "Is there anything else wrong, honey? Besides the project you were talking about, you seem awfully quiet and almost," Lauren finally asked, getting a curt answer to a couple of questions she'd been asking. "No, I'm sorry. I guess I'm just tired and also already thinking about what I need to do tomorrow to be ready to head to Greensboro on Friday." David found it almost funny. What would be considered normal now? My wife could be cheating on me. I could be pranked by someone with a poor sense of humor. Or I could be the unintended victim of a wrong email address. What if it was a completely different woman and the sender mistook her for my wife? I didn't want that kind of life. Yesterday, I was sure I was happy yesterday, but today I'm filled with doubt. After cleaning up the dinner dishes, David and Lauren watched a little TV. Then they talked about their plans for the weekend and finally started getting ready for bed. David had already said he was going to bed early because he had to go to work early to get ready for his trip. David's stomach was tied in a knot at the thought. He was worried about what he would do if Lauren made any moves about making love tonight. He thought about Wednesday nights and whether there had been any pattern to their lovemaking lately. He realized with horror that from his recollection, it had been about 50-50ths. He felt like he was in the dark, trying to pin the tail on the donkey. Lauren got into bed first, and when David joined her, she snuggled up behind him, hugged him tightly, and reached up to scratch his chest with her fingernails. "Can I take your mind off work for 30 minutes? She playfully offered. "Love, Lauren," she playfully repeated. "How much more could I take before I lost my temper?" "Darling, I won't be much help today or tomorrow. I'm just too distracted by this project." He couldn't believe how much his life had changed in the 60 seconds it took to read and understand this simple email he had received just 10 hours ago. "It's okay, honey. I understand. I just thought if you were ready for it, I'd offer you some, well. Lauren gave David a hug and kissed the back of his neck before saying goodnight and rolling over to the other side. David was relieved, but he was also confused. What did she mean by, if you're up for it? David got up and left for work before Lauren woke up, so he avoided any further questions or looks. He realized he was handling the problem badly, whether it was real or imagined. Last night had reminded him of Trader's heart. He knew he had to avoid another night of close contact with Lauren. Hey honey, I'm going to be working late tonight getting ready for tomorrow's trip and meetings, so don't worry about dinner for me. I'll see you probably before bed. David left in her voicemail around noon on Thursday. However, the rest of the day was spent without preparing for business meetings. David was a planner and organizer by nature and profession, so while he had no hard facts about. After discovering her infidelity, he wanted to get organized. He called around until he found a lawyer who could meet with him the next day and searched the internet for recording devices. Once he'd decided what he wanted to buy, he looked around town for any local stores with similar devices and found a store he would stop by before heading home. He was competent enough in his actual job that no one would ask him what was going on, but his heart and mind were clearly affected. David got off work a little late and went into a store with eavesdropping equipment and bought a simple voice-activated pen that he thought he could hide in Lauren's purse, which he usually had with her in her office and in her car. He also brought work home to get ready for the next day's trip before Lauren went to bed. "Hi, sweetie, I'm so glad you're finally home," Lauren said as she walked to the door when David arrived around 9 p.m. "Morning. How's the project and the trip going? I think we've put more resources into it since we found out about these new problems, so I'm hoping it'll be resolved on Friday, one way or another." This is playing with fire. David reflected, one way or another. Better or worse, he said. I wonder if she feels the same way now. Thursday night was a repeat of the previous night, only with hugs to her credit. Lauren seemed. She was completely unfazed and, as far as David could tell, behaved towards him in the same way she had before. Conventionally speaking, however, he was such a complete wreck that Lauren probably had no trouble appearing normal compared to David on Friday. He got up again at dawn, checked his pen, put it in Lauren's purse and left the house. He killed some time at a coffee shop and then headed out to meet with his lawyer at 10. Midnight M. David thought this meeting was just to get some information, but he actually ended up really liking the lawyer. They chatted about David's email and his concerns, as well as the fact that today was a date with a potential lover that David was going to check out for himself. He realized that he only had the one damning email, so he decided to. From his lawyer, David learned the messy reality of divorce. Without children, a no-fault divorce was relatively easy, especially since David and Lauren made comparable salaries and had similar retirement plan balances. He was mostly in debt, so selling it would have been more of an emotional upheaval than a financial strain. However, David left the law office in complete disarray. How can I even think this nightmare won't be so bad? We were supposed to be together forever, until death do us part. David spent his lunch hour at Starbucks, surfing the internet. He also spent a lot of time online, looking at websites about divorce. There was lots of information about how to spot a cheating spouse and how to avoid being caught, as well as how to hide your income and find it again. The most interesting sites were those about why spouses cheat. Nothing David read mentioned why Lauren might have done it. That was probably why David hoped deep down that it was all a mistake. They were too close, too much in love, too in sync with each other for that to be true. When he could no longer bring himself to talk about cheating, he packed up and left, heading for the motel. Time stretched slowly, or so it seemed to David, as he drove to the motel mentioned in that damning email. He realized that if the whole affair story was indeed true, then it was entirely possible that Lauren didn't always use the same motel. By the end of the day, he still wouldn't know anything for sure. The pen he'd put in her purse might eventually give him some answers. But David knew he couldn't take any more of this uncertainty about the state and future of his marriage. He pulled into the motel parking lot at 1. It was 4 p.m. He drove around until he found a parking spot that overlooked most of the rooms in the office. Now he would just have to wait. There weren't many people in and out of the motel, so when the man parked the latest model Acura and visited the office, he then entered the room. On the first floor, he seemed vaguely familiar to David. He couldn't quite place the name, but David thought he had seen the man before. All of David's doubts and hopes vanished about 5 minutes later when Lauren's Honda Accord parked next to the Acura, and she jumped out with her. She had her handbag with her, and walked to the door of the same room, and knocked quickly. A few seconds later, a man opened the door, and Lauren stepped inside with her usual ease and confidence. To hell with my life, it's all true, David thought, pounding his fists on the steering wheel. Could Lauren really do this to us? It just didn't make any sense. David had never felt so blind in his life. He'd been the planner and organizer, but now he was at a loss. His thoughts darted left, right, up and down like the new Fury roller coaster at Carowinds. David suddenly realized that he was now in a marriage in crisis. He knew that Lauren had cheated on him at least twice, and that she'd taken time off work to do it. He felt there was no point in staying at the motel. He wasn't going to confront them by knocking on the door. He needed time and space to calm down and prepare for whatever his next move might be. Up to this point, he'd been in disbelief. He was totally unprepared for his next steps. Then he remembered the pen he'd put in her purse and wrinkled his nose bitterly. He thought, this is just great. He had the presence of mind to take a few pictures of the two cars parked side by side in front of their love nest. He took a close-up of the man's car with the license plate on it. Then he slowly turned to leave and get back on the road. He didn't have a destination in mind. He just drove aimlessly until he almost ran a red light and was almost hit. One of these things really shook him up. So he stopped at a brew pub and had a beer to try to gather his thoughts. At first, he thought he had gone from idle suspicion to full awareness, but he realized how little he knew at this point. He had no idea who this guy was, how long this had been going on, and, most importantly, why. As far as he knew, for 7 years plus, he and Lauren had been exclusive, engaged, and then married. He had enough evidence to counter it, but not enough to know if what Lauren would answer would be true. As much as it pained him to listen to, he had to know. He knew he had to wait to get a pen out of her purse before he would say anything to Lauren. He also knew he couldn't be around a Lovick Lauren if she was in the mood to make love to him later. After his supposed business trip, he'd been pushing her away this week, citing the trip so his ready-made excuse would be gone. Further refusal to make love to Lauren would likely increase her awareness that something was going wrong. So what to do? I need that pen. Then I need to quickly confirm that there's something on it. Then I could get out of the house and stay for a few days to figure out where I am in all this. David sketched out in his mind, with that general plan in mind. David had a sneaky thought. She thinks I'll be arriving later than usual tonight, in order for me to shake her and my lover. I need to call with the news that I'm almost home after finishing his beer and paying the bill. He pulled the car back onto the road and dialed Lauren's cell phone number. He wrote a voicemail message. Hi, honey. Great news. The prep work paid off big time and everyone. He did a great job of getting things back on track, so I'm about 30 minutes from Charlotte and the traffic isn't too bad. I should be home around my normal time. I hope that scares the hell out of her. Sly David had said aloud to himself. He headed towards the house, and when he arrived, he quickly packed a couple of bags and put them in the trunk of his car. He then sat down and wrote a note to Lauren. Depending on how the night had gone, he wanted to be able to just escape without much confrontation. He didn't know what was on the tape, so he didn't want to have a confrontation just yet. Part of his reasoning was also to want to dazz her as much as she had dazed him when David called. Lauren and her lover Rob were in the final throes of their second love-making that day. Today was their last day together, thanks to the extra runway provided to them by David's. On this trip, they were making a second round for the first time. They had previously viewed it as a celebration or a victory dance, but now it seemed like a potentially risky move. Listening to the voicemail message, she muttered, I need to move, Rob. It was David saying he was on his way back and would be home around 6. It was 10 p.m. Morning. As usual, at least you got the heads-up call he promised you. Rob joked back as Lauren hugged him and said goodbye, then quickly ran to the bathroom to take a shower. Routine and habits took over. Rob got dressed and left the room while Lauren showered. He was heading to the gym for his usual workout after a night of love and showers. On the way home, Lauren was more concerned about David's early return and his happy mood about the project. I thought he'd come home late, probably tired from meetings and travel, but he'll probably want to make love tonight after missing most of the week, she thought as she turned into their neighborhood, still a little nervous. She rounded the corner, approached her house, and saw David's car already parked in the driveway. He made good time in Friday's traffic, she muttered aloud as she parked her Accord next to his new Civic. She thought he might want to. He was eager to greet her as soon as she walked in, and he thought that more time since their illicit afternoon lovemaking might be helpful. Perhaps a preemptive suggestion of a nice celebratory dinner might be a good idea. David was on pins and needles when he heard Lauren's car in the driveway. It would be the first time he would see her since he knew for sure she was cheating. He had packed her bags and put them in the car, and he had even prepared a note to write down. He sat in the living room ready to catch Lauren as soon as she arrived. "Hi, honey," Lauren said as she walked in and saw David getting up from his chair. "Looks like everything went well. Why don't we go out to eat and celebrate?" she asked, as they hugged and kissed each other. "That sounds great. I got home early, so why don't you go upstairs and change while I make a reservation somewhere?" David suggested. Lauren readily agreed and threw her work bag and purse on the table, then walked upstairs. The stairs to the master bedroom, David waited until he heard the shower start, and then went to her purse and pulled out a pen. He pressed rewind and then play, heard the beginning of the lovers' conversation, and quickly turned the pen off. "Well, that settles it. Time to get out of here." David pulled out his note for Lauren and left it on the table next to her bags. Stopping in the doorway, David looked back at their house, sadly realizing that nothing would ever be the same. Between him and her, Lauren got ready as quickly as she could, showering and dressing. She went downstairs, assuming he was probably hungry after the trip, and also probably wanted to make love later. Not seeing him in the living room, she made her way to the kitchen and saw a note lying on the table. She picked it up and started to read it. "I know, God, no, this can't be happening, Lauren. I know about your lover and your affair. I couldn't believe it. It was true, but your afternoon date at the motel proved it. You hurt me so much, and I'm so sad and angry that I can't be there for you right now. I'll be gone for a night or two while I try to gather my thoughts, and then I'll call you to arrange a time for us to talk. Don't try to contact me or find me. I don't want to see you until I'm ready." David left the house and drove to the hotel, settling into his room. He ate dinner downstairs. He ordered a double scotch on the rocks, and then went back to the room to listen to the tape of Lauren's afternoon betrayal of their marriage vows. He sat down by the desk and turned on the recorder. He heard the next sound as Lauren entered the room. "Hi, Rob. I can't believe we're already done with this case, both in terms of appointments and time. I didn't think we'd have finished it so quickly. I think we'd have had at least 5 meetings so easily and even within 30 days. Rob, hi, Lauren. Yeah, I thought it would take longer. We spent a lot more time planning and preparing than we did executing. I guess that's the result of good planning. I suppose I have to say I'm glad it's over. The stress of hiding our affair is taking its toll on me, and I can see why, long-term romances usually end badly. It's the same here. I know my wife has no idea, but I can see how, over time, it could easily stop. You said David would be out of town until later tonight." "Right. I was thinking we could have a drink, just the two of us, tonight to celebrate our success and end. I'm feeling pretty good about it, Rob. I'm on board with the idea, but rules are rules, so we're not trying anything new that wasn't on the list." Lauren and Rob undressed, and David heard kisses and soft moans coming from Lauren. He also heard the bed creak and listened to the entire 90 minutes of... David was surprised by 2 things. Firstly, the lovemaking seemed normal, even routine. He couldn't imagine why Lauren would risk her marriage for the same thing. Secondly, neither of them were being degrading or denigrating towards their spouses. David knew the affair was real. They'd met. They'd been together 5 times, but he still had no idea why. Friday night was mostly sleepless for both David and Lauren. Eventually, David gave up and realized there was nothing more to be gleaned from the tape. Deciding to take advantage of the weekend and freedom from work, he texted Lauren, "I'll stop by your house at 11 p.m. to talk if that's okay with you." Lauren picked up her phone when she heard the ping of the incoming message. "Yes, please come home. I'm so sorry I hurt you." David didn't read her reply, arriving just before 11 a.m. David made his way to the front door and rang the bell. Lauren opened the door. "David, you don't have to ring your own doorbell. I didn't feel comfortable just walking in." "Lauren, let's sit down at the kitchen table and discuss next steps." David's demeanor and the way this discussion was going made Lauren feel uneasy. She was sitting across the table from David, and time stood still for a moment. Then David cleared his throat and asked a question that shocked her. He wanted to know if she was denying the facts he'd learned about her activities with Rob. Lauren started to cry and thought about David's question and how focused and businesslike he was. She felt like this conversation was meant to make David realize that nothing she'd done had changed her feelings for him. She and Rob were having this affair just to prove something. David only knew about the love affair, not the conversations at Lauren's work that led to Rob and Lauren's plan to prove their friends wrong. "Before we go any further, you must first realize that Rob and I only did this to prove that we could have an affair without anyone finding out. A few months ago, many of us at work were discussing affairs and how they are almost always discovered and the tragic upheaval they cause in marriages. The discussion fell into two camps. Some thought that all beyond a one-night stand, affairs were bound to be discovered. Some thought that keeping a relationship a secret would require planning and deception. But it could be done. Rob and I thought otherwise. We discussed the precautions necessary. Wait, were you testing whether you could have an affair that would go unnoticed? That's right, talking about it has become. It was just a game at first. We laid out a few hypotheses over lunch and then got pretty detailed. We were convinced we could make it happen, but there was one catch. We had to keep it a secret. We decided to put our plan to the test. We knew Rob loved his wife as much as I love you, and that this game meant nothing to our relationship. It was just an experiment. We set a few conditions for the test. It had to last at least 30 days, and we had to meet at least 5 times. It was just an experiment, David. We don't love each other at all. We love our spouses. We didn't do anything stupid that we didn't share with our partners, and it never took anything away from our spouses. What do you mean it never took anything away from me? I used to have a faithful wife, and now she's gone. I suppose that's true now that you know. But if you'd never found out, you'd believe I was faithful during over the past month. If you've been looking for love after Rob and I were together, I've never turned you down. I'm sorry if I've given you the wrong impression. I'm not trying to make things worse for you. I know you're hurt, and you must feel terrible about what you heard. I'm truly sorry for what I've done. I'm sorry if I've hurt you, but I hope the details I've shared can show you that I love you, and that I never had feelings for Rob. He's just a colleague I had sex with, and that was it. There was no love, no feelings. I know it's a horrible thing to say, but I hope you understand. Rob, we were really careful, and we were sure we'd never get caught. We didn't think it would affect our marriages. So, I'm going to tell you everything. You cheated on me for a month, slept with a man other than your husband about 5 times, and you were fully intending to keep it a secret from me and your husband for the rest of our lives. So, I'm going to ask you again, are you denying any of the facts I've learned about you and B? Lauren looked a little uncomfortable as I pressed her on her excuses. I accept that the facts are what they are, but I do think the reasons for them matter. It was just sex, and it wasn't even sex born of attraction to each other. There was no lust between us. We just needed sex to prove we could hide an affair. Sex was meaningless to each of us. David was torn between thinking that Lauren must have swallowed a bottle of stupid pills last month and wondering if she always held such crazy beliefs. I do believe that's subtle part of your deception. There doesn't seem to be much passion between you two. David, there was no passion. It was just sex. I know you're hurt, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it up to you. Wait, that's still this whole, it was just sex excuse. You should know that very well. We talked about being faithful when we decided to be exclusive. We talked about it at length when we talked about marriage. We dated exclusively for almost a year, and we talked again before I proposed. We specifically promised each other fidelity during pre-wedding counseling and in our wedding vows. I don't recall any mention of eloping. It was just sex. Lauren saw that arguing with their story was pointless. David, you're right. We did discuss fidelity at length. The point I'm trying to make is that we are on the same page where it matters, meaning our love for each other. I loved you for the last 7 years and never had any feelings for Rob. If playing games with Rob 5 times in 1 month could have mattered, we would have. But it was just sex. It was necessary to pull off a secret affair. It was more like it was all the stupid pills' fault. Then David seized on. So, Lauren just said that you didn't have to have sex with Rob, and you also said that no one else would ever know about the affair. So, you could have done something else in that hotel room. Why didn't you just play Yahtzee? Or maybe you should have played backgammon. There are plenty of other things you could have done besides just sex, and it would look and smell like an affair. You'd basically just have to prove that you were capable of having an affair. You didn't actually need to have sex. You still needed to hide your activities from your spouses, so there was some guilt involved. You were leaving work early anyway, so you'd still have to hide it. It didn't matter with or without sex. Lauren's head tilted to the side as she considered David's challenge. She felt herself sinking fast and deep. She couldn't think of any other excuse to overcome his assumption, since no one would ever know it didn't really matter if Rob and Lauren had sex or not to win their unannounced bet. They just needed to play out the affair with all the necessary secrets and hotel meetings. So why was she actually having sex? I don't know, David. I never thought about that aspect of secrecy. We planned a secret affair to see if we could pull it off, Then we decided to test our plan. We were just supposed to go all the way to the end. Lauren, you've used the word just a lot today to downplay what you've done. For example, you said, just a second, or just a little. But what you've done is actually pretty damaging. It's the worst thing one of us could do to our marriage. The fact that you can't see it yourself is probably worse than you making love to another man. It's been 5 times in 1 month. It almost feels like you've slept with him all of 5 times, so it's no big deal. Well, this is a big deal to me. At this point, we're not getting anywhere, so I'm leaving for now. David left, heading back to the hotel on Monday. He'd canceled work and was mulling over Lauren's arguments. He couldn't believe she thought so little of her fidelity that she'd cast it aside to win a phantom bet against co-workers. The workers who knew nothing thought it was all a game to her. David thought to himself, I could sit here agonizing and trying to find some explanation for her actions. But there isn't one. This was not just sex. It was a betrayal of her commitment to him and her precious vows to keep that commitment to him forever. Until death do us part. David was surprised to find that, despite the difficult decision he'd made, he felt surprisingly at ease with it. He felt better than he had at any time since he'd received that unexpected email. Lauren readily agreed to another meeting the next day. What is it? She asked, quickly looking through the stack of papers. It's just a divorce, David replied.